Hello everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk about Bitcoin and whether or not we should believe this rally. If you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter, where we put out regular updates, better risk indicators, and more. So there's been quite a bit of talk about a June rally out in kind of the crypto sphere, certainly on crypto Twitter, something that different people are floating. Obviously, it's something that most people are hoping will happen. But I want to talk today about some indicators we have here on the channel and how plausible that kind of eventuality seems. So the first indicator I want to talk about today is the Trend Confidence Indicator, or TCI. If you're not familiar with this indicator, it's an indicator that's trying to get at how confident we can be in a given trend that Bitcoin, in this case, happens to be in. So this is the full view of the TCI across the entire history of Bitcoin. It's a little bit hard to see exactly what's going on because, TCI is a relatively volatile indicator. So what I'm going to do is just zoom in on more recent price action to talk about this so we can see what's going on a little bit more clearly. So this is just the TCI, same thing I was showing you here. We're just zooming in back on this action up here. So from the start of 2021. And the nice thing with the TCI is it often acts as a bit of a leading indicator for trend reversals, or at least catches them quite quickly. So, for example, you can see, I should say that the way you read the TCI is that in the green means it's kind of a general bullish outlook, red is a general bearish outlook. And the idea is that if you're in an uptrend like this and the TCI is green, that's good. That means you can be relatively confident the trend will continue. But if you're in an uptrend and the TCI flips to red, that's bad. That means that that uptrend is likely come to an end, at least for the near future, and you kind of have to wait until we get that green signal again before getting too excited. So for example, here we saw the TCI flip red for quite a long time in this roll over top we had in early 21, really acting as a leading indicator, an early warning that this was not very believable and that a correction to the downside was likely exactly what we saw. But then the TCI flipped bullish back in the summer of 21, even before we found the absolute bottom. So as again, acting as a leading indicator, an early warning that this downtrend wasn't very believable, and off to the races we went. And in more recent history, the TCI had flipped green ever since down here in the kind of the mid 30Ks all the way up to 48K. Then right around, I think it was about 43K, it flipped red, and then that pre-staged this massive dump to the downside we saw. But you'll notice that we're starting to come up, get awfully close to zero, this dividing line between bullishness and bearishness. And in fact, we can actually probe this model to ask it what price level it's exactly watching for. Right now, it's watching for 31.9 roughly K, which is interesting because the price of Bitcoin has actually been flirting with these price levels today. Now, with the TCI, generally speaking, you want to start seeing closes above a price before you get too excited. So just because Bitcoin wicked above this price today doesn't necessarily mean we should be all, cracking out the champagne and saying that we're off to the races with another rally. But certainly if we can start closing, if we can close today or in the next couple days, start closing some days above these critical levels, put in some green days up here, that might be a bullish sign that maybe at the very least some upside, even if it's limited like what we saw back here, might be in the offing. And then, of course, I think everyone hopes it would be something more like this, but, who knows what's going to happen. But we're not quite there yet. So there's still a little bit more work that needs to be done for the TCI to be starting to see this as being more of an uptrend than a downtrend. But we're awfully close, and we're the closest we've been in a very, very long time, as you can see here. Really ever since we lost that around 43K range, the TCI has been bearish on Bitcoin, and it's been justified in being so. Now we need to see if we can start plotting a course back to the upside, closing above these critical levels. So something to be watching for sure. Now, another relevant indicator that we can look at is our risk indicator, the upside downside potential indicator for Bitcoin. This is the long-term UDPI I'm showing you here. So this is the price action of Bitcoin color-coded the output of the UDPI. 5 is high risk. That's when the upside potential is low, downside potential is high. -5, low risk. That's when the downside potential is likely tapped out. Upside potential is high. What you can see is that we had bottomed out, and actually I can show this a bit more clearly if I just show the raw output of the UDPI overlaid with the Bitcoin price here. we actually bottomed out at around -3 at this bottom that we put in here in January, and then we plotted that course back to the upside up to 48K, and then we came back down, and we've actually broken below this level on the UDPI. You know, one thing that's notable with this is that we have been kind of consistently putting in higher lows here, kind of a breaking of that structure, which kind of shows how bearish things have been. You know, generally this kind of structure, the more bullish outlook, this kind of confirms that right now it's not the case that we're just in the middle, continuing to be in the middle of a bull market, that this is definitely a more concerning sign. But certainly we have gotten pretty deep here. If we just think about this in terms of raw risk level, what this is telling us is that there's more realistic upside potential for Bitcoin from a longer term perspective than there is realistic downside potential. And if we're thinking about whether or not this could kind of act as a staging ground for a at least decent rally from here, certainly yes, it could, right? We've seen this happen before. You know, when Bitcoin gets down into these price levels, you know, it tends to be near bottoming points. And it doesn't always mean we have to go on some meaningful rally, right? You know, when we did it back here at this bottoming out point, you know, there was a rally that came out of that off of this bottom, but not really anything too spectacular. And then, you know, we came down here. This really was what catalyzed that move going all the way up there. But certainly, historically, we do see some kind of upside movement oftentimes from these levels. You know, even back here, you know, we saw at least some upside before going back down. So if we're asking the question, you know, could this be a point where we could stage a rally? Absolutely. But doesn't mean it's necessarily that we're at the bottom and that we can't, you know, just roll over from where we are and go down further. You know, definitely doesn't mean that either, right? You know, there's still room to the downside. We still have room that we could fall that is plausible from the UDPI's perspective. It's just saying that this, basically all this means though, is that these levels have been staging grounds for rallies back to the upside in the past. So certainly it would be plausible for it to be another place where we might be able to start staging a rally back up. But we'll have to wait and see. But certainly you'd be much more confident in calling this being a potential starting point of a rally than something that's all the way up here like we were up here, or certainly that anything that's especially higher than that. You know, usually rallies start off, if you just look back in Bitcoin's history, you know, rallies usually start off somewhere below the -1 level at the very least, if not a little bit lower, if not below -2. And so we're certainly back down in that range that we've been to the past that has set that launching pad. But of course, nothing is certain. Now with the UDPI, we can also look at different time frames. So I was showing you the long-term UDPI. You can see is starting to flatten out here as potentially Bitcoin's gearing up to put in maybe a relief rally from here. We can also look at some of the other time frames. So the medium-term UDPI cares about moves that play out over weeks to months. The short-term cares about moves that play out over days to weeks. And you see is that with both of these, you know, they're starting to react to this more recent strength that Bitcoin has been showing, especially the short-term UDPI, as you'd expect. You know, it's really paying a lot more attention to short-term volatility, trying to plot a course back up. But again, all three had been down in this kind of -3 range as we were putting in some of those lows. And now, you know, that could very reasonably be, reasonably be a place where we start setting a course back to the upside. So the medium term's at -3.05, so just slightly above where the long-term UDPI is right now. And the short term's at around -2. But certainly, this is a place where we could see some nice upside from here. You know, the short-term UDPI, you know, in our last rally, you know, we saw going up through here, if you can call it a rally, you know, the move back up to 48K, got up, you know, cleared well above 0 in that rally. So should we kind of continue in this movement, we might end up seeing this going up, breaking into those kind of levels. And then, who knows, maybe we're going to hit some resistance. And that's the thing that I think we always had to keep in mind with any of these things, is that we're still in a bear market. And so even if we do rally from here, no one really knows where that rally is going to take us, right? It could be just a bear market rally that takes us up to some previous resistance zone, probably a bit lower than the prior high, so maybe in the low 40Ks or something like that, and then gets rejected and we fall tumbling back down. Totally could happen. But of course, also, you know, it's not impossible that if the more macro picture has found its bottom, if the stock market is going to generally trend up from here, if inflation has peaked, if the Fed will start to be less hawkish, all those kind of different factors that you can look at, if those things have transpired, then maybe this could actually be the place where Bitcoin could start charting a course back to more reasonable, appreciable upside. So my overall valuation is that, as long as the TCI is bearish, I'm personally not getting all that excited, although we're certainly getting to a point where some more optimism might be in the cards if we start closing above these critical levels. And then should that happen, then I do think it's very plausible that we could put in at least some reasonable upside from here. Too hard to know if that's just going to be a bear market rally or if that will actually be, if that capitulation down to 25K would be the actual bottom. Time will tell with that. But certainly, the possibility of June rally is not something that can be discounted. But I think Bitcoin has just a little bit more it has to do before I'm going to be getting all that worked up about this. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter. Put a lot of updates about our indicators and more over there.